so I don't drop it on the floor. First of all, I have to say thank you, Pastor Dave, for letting me give this message. It was Tuesday morning. I was on my way to work, and I was riding in the car. And God just started to speak to me. As He started to speak to me, I knew this message He was giving me. It was so powerful, and I heard God say, "You need to share that." And I was like, "All right." He's like, "And you need to share that on Sunday." And I was like, "Okay." And I was like, "All right, God, if you want me to share that on Sunday, I have no problem with that. Would you just tell that Pastor Dave thing that I need to share that on Sunday?" And, God said, Pastor Dave's a man. Now, He didn't mean that in a man like a man doesn't have a clue. He meant he's a human, And He's like, "You know what? This isn't about Pastor Dave. This is about you and me, and you being faithful and you being obedient." So God called me out, told me right like it was, and I said, "Okay, God, I will." And so I quickly got to the office and sent him a message on Facebook, and I was like, "I have this message, I have to say it, or I'm just going to burst if I don't." And he was like, and as soon as I sent that message, the devil started to creep in there, and he's like, "Oh, you shouldn't have done that." "Oh, what if he's offended?" All those things were coming in my mind, and I was like, and I was like, "Well, God, then don't let him get the message. Let it get lost in, the cloud somewhere, But it didn't, And he got the message, and he responded, and so positively. And I told him that later. I was like, "Oh, good," because as soon as I sent that message, he's like, "The devil is a liar." Just threw it right out there, all capital LIAR, exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point. And I do believe that I just have to share this message tonight. I just, it was so strong in my heart, and I'm just so thankful for that. And then just so you guys know, I'm not a preacher, I'm just me, and I'm just sharing what's on my heart, what God spoke to me, and I know that it will speak to you. I want to start by reading 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 4, and you guys all know this, so you don't even have to turn to it if you don't want to. I'm going to read it for you anyways. But it's, "Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It is not rude. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects. Always trusts. Always hopes. Always perseveres. Love never fails." Father, please help me tonight, Lord, to give your words, Lord. Just pray for our hearts to be open, our minds to be open, Father, for us not only hear what you have, but not miss anything that you have, Father. I thank you and I praise you in your precious name. Are you willing?
Yes.
All right. 2 Fridays ago, my grandmother passed away. And my grandmother was 87 years old, and her and my grandfather would have been married 70 years in October. And never in my life have I ever seen this passage of love just spilled out in a person's life that I have through my grandmother and my grandfather. I really haven't, only through them. And 4 years ago, my grandmother had a stroke, and she ended up in the nursing home. And every day for 4 years, my grandfather has gotten up in the morning, gotten to the nursing home before she even woke up, fed her breakfast, got her out of bed, gave her lunch, took her for walks when it was nice outside. He read to her. He watched TV with her. He laughed with her. He cried with her. He gave her dinner. And when it was bedtime, he got her ready for bed, he tucked her in, and when she fell asleep, he went home. And he did that every day for 4 years. And there was no question in my grandfather's mind what he was going to do today. There was no question. Today, I go to be with the love of my life, with my bride, and I stay with her all day long. And then I leave, and then I come back and I do the same thing the next day. And you know what? It wasn't easy. And like it says here, holds no record of wrongs. You know, sometimes my grandmother, she would wake up in the middle of the night, and he wasn't there. When he came in, she'd give it to him. Where were you? You're with some other woman, aren't you? You see, she suffered from dementia. And, you know, my grandfather, he could have been angry about that. He could have been bitter about that. He could have said, you know what? I can't do this today. I don't think any of us would have blamed him. He could have said, you know, this is too hard. I need a break. I'm not feeling well today. He didn't do any of that. He was faithful. So faithful to the love of his life. And if you ask him, he'll say, I love her. He would say, she is the best thing that ever happened in my life. And this is our life together. And I'm going to rejoice in it. And I'm going to enjoy every moment of it. He was so faithful. And I was beginning to see, I do want to say, that she would get angry. And she would also, he'd feed her. And sometimes she didn't like the food that he would give her. And we've been there a few times. He'd put the food in her mouth, and she'd just spit that right back out. She did not like it at all. You know, she may not have been able to verbalize it, but she definitely showed her dislike for that food. And sometimes he would give her medicine, and we were there the first time she pulled this trick on him. He would spoon the applesauce with the pill on it, put it in her mouth, and next thing you know, everything's gone, but that pill is still on her tongue, you know? And I was like, Pap, I don't think she took that pill. Look. We're like, look, it's in it. He's like, what? So he would, keep pushing the food in her mouth until she swallowed it. She didn't like it, okay? I'll tell you. And, she maybe couldn't express herself in words sometimes, but I don't think she appreciated having to be there, although she appreciated the love that she got from her husband. And, she didn't like it. It was a fight sometimes. But I was beginning to see in my grandfather, what I have seen in my grandfather over these years, a picture of Jesus. I really have. He was a picture of Jesus to me. And as I was thinking about this in the car, I was thinking about, God, you're so faithful. You come to me every day, like my grandfather comes to my grandmother. Every day. There's no question in God's mind. Am I going to dwell with you? Am I going to be with you? Am I going to hug you? Am I going to answer your prayers? Am I going to talk to you today? There is no question in God's mind what he's going to do. He says the same thing. I love you. You're the best thing in my life right now. You're my bride. And I want to be with you. And, even if we don't like it, he holds no record of wrongs either. And I was just amazed thinking about how faithful my grandfather was, but how even more faithful. I mean, as faithful as he was, he's no Jesus. He's not Jesus. He's amazing, even more faithful than that. And then Jesus spoke to me. He said, I want to give that kind of love to my children, to my people, to my bride. I want to give that kind of love to you. But the truth is, there are too few people willing to sit in that chair. I have this kind of love that I read here in 1 Corinthians. God is love, right? We could say God is patient, God is kind, God does not envy, God does not boast, God is not proud, God is not rude, God is not self-seeking, God is not easily angered, God keeps no record of wrongs, God does not delight in evil, God rejoices with the truth, God always protects, God always trusts, He always hopes, always perseveres, and God never fails. He wants to give that kind of love to us, but it requires something from us. We have to be willing to sit in the chair to receive that kind of love. Oh, that broke my heart. And when I heard that, I was like, help me be willing to sit in the chair. In order to sit in the chair, the first thing we have to do is we have to recognize our need for the chair. Sometimes we think, I want to offer something to the kingdom. I have a gift. I have a talent. I'm pretty smart. I've got this, I've got that. I want to offer something to the kingdom, but do you know, oh, how silly that is. Do you know that there is nothing that we can give to Jesus that He does not already have? There is nothing that He needs except our complete and entire surrender to sit in the chair. We have to realize that compared to God, compared to what He has, we're like my grandmother. What we can do for ourselves is compared to what my grandmother could do for herself and what my grandfather could do for her. What we can do in our own strength. To God, we're nothing but a person who can't provide for their own needs. But Jesus is here. He's ready. He's willing. He's certainly able to provide and lavish that kind of love that my grandfather did on my grandmother. He wants to pour it out on us, but we have to first see that we are that person. Nobody wants to see themselves as weak. Let's face it. Who wants to be weak? Who wants to be disabled? But that's what God needs. He needs us to put ourselves in that chair, to see ourselves as nothing. I think too often in the church, we talk about who we are in Christ before we talk about who we are without Christ. Because in order to really sit in that chair and be all that Christ is in us, we have to know who we are without Him. And if we don't, we're just fooling ourselves. We're just playing a game, and it's not going to get us anywhere. Once we recognize our need, once we see ourselves as weak, feeble, unable to provide for ourselves like God can provide for us, then we have to sit in the chair. And I'm going to bring this chair in here. I'm not sure what you think when you look at this chair. I'm not sure if you fear this. I think many of us do. I think we'll do just about anything to stay out of this chair. I think many of us think of this as something I'm not ready for. I don't want to be in the chair. But I'm telling you, God has this love He wants to lavish out on us. He wants to pour it on us, and we're only going to get it when we sit in the chair. And let me tell you this, you cannot sit in the chair like this. like this. You can't sit like this. Do you ever try to walk like this when somebody's trying to wheel you around? It doesn't work like that. That's not how a wheelchair works. You gotta sit back in the chair. You gotta trust in the person who's leading you. I'll tell you something else. See where my feet are? There's a place for my feet in this chair, and it's not there. Because if somebody tries to wheel you around and have your feet like this, you're going to get caught, and you're going to get hurt, and you're going to get bruises. So we have to put down a little foot thingies. And we have to put our feet up there. And like the armor of God, our feet are now readied. The gospel of peace, right here in the chair. And I'll tell you something else that you can't do, and I know that I have done this myself. There's a place for your hands, and it's not there. The place for your hands is not here when somebody's pushing you, because if you put your hands on the wheel, when somebody is pushing you, you'll get your thumb caught. You'll rip a fingernail, you will be bruised, it will hurt. But we have to put our hands in here. I don't know about you, but sitting here like this, I feel pretty weak. The Bible says, 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 9, "For my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." Do you know that this picture right now, God sees his perfect power? I don't know about you, that blows me away. It just blows me away that this is his perfect power. You know, because when we surrender it all, when we give it all to him, he can become strong. It can be his strength that we can operate in. And you know what? I think this is kind of crazy to think about. But I wrote this down. I wrote, Jesus is looking for an army of the geriatric, the unabled, the disabled, the debilitated, the inoperative, the impaired, and the incapable. That's Jesus' army. You know why? Because his strength is everything. And if we can put ourselves in the chair, sit here, and make ourselves as little as possible so he can be as great as possible, God's like, that's my army. That's the picture he has. You know, we picture an army as being great and strong, and this is how God pictures his great and strong army, is when we are weak, when we are sitting in the chair. This is hard. It's not easy, but there is a greatness. There is a journey that we can go on in our wheelchair with Jesus. There is a journey that he wants to take us on if we're willing to, first of all, sit in the chair. So that's the question. Are you willing? Are you willing to sit in the chair? And like I already said, as faithful as my grandfather was to my grandmother, as much as I saw of Jesus in his life, he is no Jesus. He really is not Jesus. All that he could give my grandmother was nothing compared to what God is waiting and willing and able to give us when we sit in the chair. I'm going to ask you to close your eyes for a minute. I'm going to ask you to just really think here for a minute. I'm going to ask God to show you who you are. I want him to show you and me our weaknesses. I want him to show you as a person who is dependent on him for our every need. That we need him for our nourishment. We need him for our medicine. We need him to take us where we need to go. I want you to see yourself as that person. You know, in our society, there are two people that depend on somebody for their every need. One is the very old, and the other is the very young. And Jesus said, if you're going to enter the kingdom of heaven, you need to come like a child. Totally, completely, entirely dependent upon Jesus. Do you see yourself as that person? And if you're willing, I want you to sit in the wheelchair. I want you to just sit in the chair, put your feet up, put your arms in. Say, yes, Lord, I'm willing. I'm willing to be weak so that your power can be made perfect in me. I can tell you, I can see it right now. I can see Jesus. I can see Jesus come behind you, put his hands on the wheelchair. With one hand, you see a hand come around in front of you, a nail-pierced hand. And he reaches and he grabs your hand. And when he grabs your hand, you are filled with strength you have never known. You are filled with a joy that is unspeakable. There are no words to describe it. You are more than you ever imagined you could be. And you are his. Completely and entirely his. And I think Jesus takes you out of that chair and walks you in his own strength. In his own strength, he takes you everywhere you need to go. And I think from time to time, we just got to put ourselves in the chair. We just got to say, hi, you're right, God. I can't do this on my own. There's nothing I want in me. I want it all in you. He comes beside you like my grandfather to my grandmother. And every single day, he has no question in his mind. Nothing is going to keep him from being with you. Nothing is going to keep him from lavishing that love on you, and you will be filled with strength and joy that you have never known. I know we don't come up to the altar a lot, but I do want to open it. And I thought if we could sing that last song, we could go up and do I Surrender All. And I wanted to say, if you want to come, you can sit in this chair. And if that's what you feel like God's telling you to do, you just sit in this chair. Because I'll tell you, it's a humbling experience to sit there and put your feet up and put your arms in. You can do that. If you want to kneel at the altar and you want to say, God, I'm willing to sit in the chair. Because that's the army that we need to be. The army of the geriatric, the army of the unable, the disabled, the debilitated, the inoperative, the impaired, and the incapable. That is the army of Christ. And that is something God was telling me. That is something I've never heard before. I never heard that was God's army. But that is God's army. That is God's army. And as we sing, I want to just say, I'm going to be right here. If you want to, come on up here to the altar, you want to sit in the chair, whatever it is about if you're willing to sit in the chair and let God live out this love in you.